Fog Entertainment back again with another Sopranos review. We're halfway through season 1 and we've got a flashback centered episode. We've got Dynamic, episode 7 of season 1. And we kick off the episode with Tony's fat son, AJ Soprano, named after him, of course. So he's got two classmates. The classmates' names are kind of irrelevant, right? But basically, they're in the chapel at the school. Maybe it's an American thing, but a chapel that's actually in the school, I've never fucking heard of that in my life. But they steal the sacramental wine, they drink most of it. AJ and the boys arrive at the PE class and then they're fucked. They can't cope with the PE class because they're drunk. And is it because he's drunk or because he's a fat bastard? Not really, convinced either way on the matter, but Tony and Carmela are called in. And then this is when we meet the school psychiatrist, Dr. Peter Galani or whatever he's called. He says AJ's probably got ADD. We've been keeping an eye on him for a while, which is kind of weird that this guy has been keeping an eye on Tony and Carmela's son for a while, considering the fact there's no reason to keep an eye on him. But he stole the sacramental wine, so we got to keep an eye on him, brother. So AJ is going to be doing some tests, and Tony and Carmela kind of agree to this. I think Tony agrees to it for the simple fact is that he's undergoing psychiatry as well, so to speak, so I think that's probably why. And then we get later that night with a dinner. Olivia and Uncle Junior are over at the house of Tony house. They're over there and this is actually a pretty funny scene because you've got Junior talking to basically addressing the whole table, but he's talking to AJ at the same time. He's like, your dad used to steal lobsters and sell them for 25 cents down on Jefferson Avenue. Of course, in previous episodes, Jefferson Avenue is used to sell coke. There's a big difference between selling lobsters and coke, which I thought was funny. But then Tony basically raises the tone of his voice and says, I don't want that sort of language spoke around my kid. He'll get the wrong idea. And then Junior's sort of screaming at Tony saying, how fucking dare you raise your voice? And then we kind of get a different conversation of Carmela, Livia, AJ, and Meadow speaking amongst themselves. And then Junior and Tony are kind of sitting at the head of the table, sparring with each other, which I thought this was funny. And then basically Carmela says, right, no more Mario Kart and no more TV and no more internet for the next 3 weeks because you're a wee bastard and you've been drinking the sacramental wine, which I thought was actually pretty funny. So he's been grounded essentially for 3 weeks. And Tony and Junior are just looking at each other. I thought this was actually a pretty well done scene for the episode. I pretty much I actually enjoyed this, which I thought was funny. And then we get Tony and Carmela there sitting discussing the fact that AJ might have ADD. Tony is surprised and basically says, "No, I know, I'm going to see a psychiatrist, but this isn't happening. He doesn't know about my life." And then he questions Carmela about the fact that Meadow might actually know about the fact that Tony's in the mob. And of course, Meadow's going to know. She's 17, 18 at this point in the show. If you're that age, you're basically a young adult. If you don't know your dad's in the mafia, I don't know what you're doing. But then Tony shows up at Bada Bing. He starts talking with Big Pussy and what's his name? Silvio. Do your kids know the fact you're in the mafia? And he's like, aye, of course they know, man. Of course they know I'm in the mafia. We're all in the mafia. Chris then shows up with stolen watches, and Tony kind of loses the plot with him saying, are you willing to do an 8-year stretch for a couple of watches? A couple of Gucci watches that are worth fucking hee-haw in the grand scheme of things. And Chris is like, what the fuck's his problem? Mama Luke, man. Then Tony, we get a couple of flashbacks, and this is where we actually see the introduction, our first appearances of certain characters. His dad, Johnny Soprano, also another appearance from his sister, Janice, who's older. I believe Tony in these flashbacks is about 8, his sister's probably about 10, 11, then his younger sister, Barbara, who appears about, 4 or 5 times throughout the show, is a baby at this point. And it's really at this stage of the show where you see how much of a cunt his fucking ma is. Livia, I just can't stand her. I understand there's characters in TV shows where, you're not supposed to like them, but when someone is so nuclear hate and it's almost like you need to change the channel when they're on the TV screen, is that the show writers doing a good job, or is that the fact the character is that bad it's almost unwatchable? I think it's a degree of unwatchable. But of course his dad died in 1986. This is set in about 1967, I believe Tony says himself, or the late 60s at the very least. And he basically talks with Dr. Melfi about the fact that he was jobbed out as a kid because he felt his dad was treating his older sister with a bit more favouritism. But it turns out he was taking his older sister to the amusements in order to meet with other members of the Soprano crime family and just other, crime family members in general. And that's where they were discussing their meets and all that stuff. Because it was a good front. It looked like they were just taking their kids to the fun fair. But in reality, they were there talking business. Tony shows up on the bus one day. He previously showed up in the boot of the car, which I find was funny. And then he actually sees his dad on the second attempt getting arrested by the police. And he goes on to talk to Dr. Melfi about this, but the fact that this is when he truly found out that his dad was a criminal and in fact involved with the mafia. So he found out at a fairly young age, 7 or 8. Well, AJ must be the age of 11, 12, 13. He's probably starting high school. I know America do it differently. Whatever grades they go into high school, I mean, it's a miracle they make it out with the amount of school shootings, but AJ's got a little bit of that. He's in the mafia, that or whatever. Tony talks about that. And it's good. I feel like this is actually good that they've used these flashbacks because you get more of Uncle Junior, and it definitely looks like that in these flashbacks, Tony appears closer with his uncle rather than his dad, which kind of makes the current situation of Uncle Junior being in charge of the entire crew and Tony a bit more relevant. But Tony, explaining all this stuff. He then goes to visit Livia, but before he visits Livia, we've got Uncle Junior appearing, and then Livia actually tells Uncle Junior that Tony is actually currently seeing a psychiatrist here in this episode, but she got that information from AJ, which she kind of plays down at first, but then AJ repeats it about 5 times, and I feel like this was actually kind of overdone because it's he says once, and then she's like, your dad didn't see a psychiatrist, and then it's repeated about 3 or 4 times. For fuck's sake, either believe him or don't. We don't need to make a meal out of it. And then she finally does, and then she says to Junior about it, and the Junior's like, what do you mean he's a whack job and he's in the psychiatrist mental hospital? And then Tony shows up, and then Junior's like, well, I've got to go with all these headaches since I'm in charge of the family now. I'm the boss. He fucks off, and then she's like, oh, he's awful full of himself that now he's the boss. It's like, why is Livia portrayed as this influential member of the family? Of course, Johnny Soprano, Tony's dad, wanted to move to LA and, become more legit. And we kind of seen in the flashbacks that she turned that down and said that if he did make that move, she would have killed all 3 of his kids. Which, again, very dramatic, as Tony said. But I don't know. At this point, I mean, at least you could say then she's a woman that's 40 odds or maybe late 30s. But at this point, she's a frail old woman. Why the fuck should Junior or Tony be listening to anything she said? She's in a fucking nursing home, for God's sake. I don't understand it, to be honest. But then Tony kind of looks at her and is like, all right, fair enough. And then we get the end of the episode where Tony and Carmela meet with the psychiatrist at the school yet again, talk about the fact that AJ's got this ADD problem. He's made the reference to South Park when he was talking about the horse on the pictures. And Tony's like, you know what, son? This is a load of shite for you to exploit children and make money. I'm no having it. Then he takes AJ home, kind of squirts Scooty cream in his face. Out of context, that would sound a bit nancy. But at the end of the day, it's his son. And that's kind of how the episode ends. We enjoyed it here. I believe he gave it an 8. I'm going to give it a 7, so that averages it at a 7.5. I like the flashbacks, but again, it's I think we need more of the actual family. Of course, we're building up towards the tail end of the season, but it is what it is, guys. So anyway, leave your thoughts down below. That is it here on Fog Entertainment for the episode of Down Neck. It is a 7.5 out of 10. Next up is episode 8. We're building more towards the finale of this show. Well, no, the season 1, I should say, and Junior being in charge and all that good stuff. And of course, I've already seen it. He hasn't seen it. As the voice breaks, hello there, Scooby-Doo! 7.5 out of 10, guys. But anyway, leave your thoughts down below here on Fog Entertainment. There'll be a couple of fairy fids about this episode. Again, this episode kind of lacks a bit of imaginary about the fairies. I feel well, what can really be made? What if Johnny Boy Soprano moved to LA and Livia told him? No, he told Livia to go shove it up her arse. I don't know, but I feel like Uncle Junior was actually far more likeable in the flashbacks. But again, is that due to his headaches and the fact he's in charge Only time will tell. Keep an eye out though on the theories, keep an eye out on the Walking Dead rankings, Sons of Anarchy rankings, all that good stuff. And until next time, leave your thoughts down below and peace.